She sat on the bar stool sipping her vodka and coke as she waited. She glanced at her watch casually and noted her friend was now 15 minutes late. Thoughts flashed across her mind about the wisdom of this escapade. The waiting was adding to her nervousness and apprehension. Carrie looked around the bar. It was just a normal lounge bar in a normal hotel. There were a handful of patrons sat listening to the tinkling piano filling the background behind the noise of their chatter. She sat alone at one end of the long bar, trying to remain aloof and inconspicuous. The glances from a couple of the patrons were making her feel nervous. They eyed her as a predator would, seeing her as an easy target maybe. A vulnerable woman alone, or possibly a call girl. The way she was dressed and the fact she was alone at the bar of a hotel gave the predators food for thought. Where was she? She looked at her watch again, 20 minutes late now. She sipped her second vodka and coke, the heat from the cool liquid warming her throat as she looked round the bar. She caught the eye of a man seated facing her at one of the tables. He raised his glass and smiled. She blushed. Her eyes immediately looked away, but she could feel him watching her. She tried to keep her eyes averted, in some way enjoying the attention but not wanting to deliberately attract or encourage it. Her phone bleeped twice. It was a message. Meanwhile, as we figure out, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to stay motivated for more such content. Now back to the story. She rummaged in her handbag and fished her smartphone out. A few flicks with her fingers and the text filled the screen. It was short and sweet, which was odd for Grace. She usually liked to give line after line filled with the gory details if she couldn't call and talk. Sorry, hun. Can't make it. Something really important has come up. She looked at the text message as her shoulders slumped. All the trouble she had gone to arranging this night out was now a complete waste of time? She dialed Grace's number. She waited. The tone in her ear started. It rang for several seconds with no answer. Then it cut off. She tried again and got the regular announcement that the number was unable to be connected. She left a message for her friend. Grace, call me. What the fuck is so important to screw things up at this late stage? Call me. Carrie tossed her phone back in her handbag. She stared at her drink, her mind racing as she tried to work out her next move. Grace had been with her every time she had ventured outside her marriage before. In fact, it was her that had encouraged her on this path. This was the first time in almost 2 years that she had been a no-show. Just what the fuck was so important? And more important than what they had planned for tonight? She felt angry and frustrated. She hadn't had sex for a week or more, or was it longer? She tried to remember. Well, maybe it was longer as she couldn't recall being with Gary, but that didn't matter, did it? Carrie was 33 years old, had been married for 8 years to Pete, who was 2 years older. They met at a mutual friend's party one Christmas and hit it off. They dated for just over a year before they realized it was serious. A year later they were married. Their careers were just starting to bloom, so they decided to leave starting a family for a few years. Maybe it was that decision that led Carrie to this situation now. She sipped her vodka and noticed the man was still casually looking her way. This time she smiled back at him. Just a fleeting smile, but enough for him to see. She knew how to play the game. She wondered how long it would take before he approached her. She licked her lips slowly, knowing he was watching her. A wicked thought shuddered through her, causing her heart to beat a little faster, and a tingle started deep inside her. Her friend Grace was put aside for now as she started the chase with the unknown guy. She sipped her drink as she thought again about how she got here. Her husband, Pete, was away for a couple of days working. He was a safety consultant and was called in to work on risk assessments for works on specialist work sites such as substations and railway lines. He traveled regularly across the UK and had also done the occasional trip to Europe too. It was these trips that gave Carrie the opportunity to stray. Her friend Grace was all too eager to have a friend along for the ride, especially after her own marriage ended in divorce 3 years ago. Grace had been caught in her own bed with 2 men when her husband had sent in an investigator to confront the cheating wife and her lovers. Grace, although shocked and surprised, was unrepentant, and when it was revealed he had been watching her for weeks, she knew there was no point in trying to defend the indefensible. Her divorce went off without fireworks, with Grace, although affected, managing to carry on her liaisons. That was when she had her friend Carrie support her, and as a friend, Carrie felt it was right to offer that support too. After the initial shock and aftermath of her divorce, the 2 friends started to go out occasionally for dinner. These outings soon took advantage of being when Carrie's husband Pete was away, so there was no pressure to be home early. The nights out were fun. They acted like single women together, with Grace encouraging Carrie to let her hair down and have some fun. She thought back to the first time it happened. They had been at a club that they had been using quite regularly, it seemed, when they were hit on by a couple of guys. The drinks flowed, there was a lot of flirting and dancing with plenty of body contact. Carrie noticed Grace was really getting into it when the guy she was with covered her lips with his. After that it was a blur until she realized they were in a hotel room naked and it was almost 3 a.m. She recalled being aware of one of the guys inside her as she looked over, seeing Grace being fucked hard from behind. She shook her head out of her reverie. The thoughts she had back then were confused, erotic, and mixed with shame, excitement, and betrayal. It took a while to get over that first time, almost 3 months in fact, but then it happened again, and again. Now it was normal for the 2 women to go out on the hunt for some strange. The early thoughts of her husband had been replaced on her nights out with pure lust. No thoughts of betrayal were allowed in her mind now. She sought only the lust that strangers could give her. Tonight was meant to be another night of fun. Now her friend had backed out at the last minute. Such a disappointment. She tried to recall how long it had been since she last had sex with Pete. It was only a couple of weeks ago, surely, but she couldn't remember. She had been out a lot recently with Grace, as Pete had been away on a few trips, so she had been with other men. But, with Pete? Something was niggling at her, in the back of her mind. Something she couldn't quite drag to the forefront, but it was there. She finished her drink and placed her glass on the bar mat. The barman looked over at her, she nodded, and he turned to pour her another. "I'll get that if I may." His deep voice was coming from close behind her. She turned and saw the man. He was around 6 foot tall, short salt and pepper hair. He looked slim and toned, confident, and with deep brown eyes. Carrie felt herself being drawn into this man's gaze, as if he were already inside her. She felt the shudders of pleasure starting between her legs and knew he was the one she wanted tonight. Her arousal coursed through her and she felt it. He noticed it too. "Put that on my tab." The barman nodded and walked away. He had seen it all before, a married woman alone and a skilled seducer moving in for the kill. It sickened him, but he thought the women got what they deserved sometimes. This one looked like a player herself, which made it worse in his eyes. There was some poor sap at home or somewhere thinking she was out with a friend, or sat at home pining for him. Yes, it sickened him that people could betray so easily. It was apparent that the man was making his move and his attentions were being well received. He turned away, polishing a glass, as watched the scene unfold. The next hour was spent in the normal routine of the chase. The barman watched as the couple played out their parts. The pursuer flirting and pressing her buttons as she flirted back, laughing at his smart talk. Flashing her smile and more at him slowly, they were both reeling each other in. Carrie forgot all about Grace as her suitor teased and flattered her. The heat in her panties was growing and she was indeed in need. She thought back to the last guy. When was that now? Oh yes, it was that young guy at the Hilton. Grace had hooked them up with 2 guys on a sales trip. Yes, that was a fun night. It crossed her mind that she could remember her nights with strangers and not with Pete. That was strange. She was brought back to the present again when her suitor placed his hand on her knee. He was stroking her knee gently as they chatted. She was not sure how long he had been doing it, but it felt nice anyway. The barman watched as the man moved in. Step by step he was gaining her trust. He could see it, and it was going to end in only one way. They all knew it too. After another vodka and coke, Carrie was buzzed enough to feel relaxed for her lover of choice. She slipped off the stool and melted into his arms as he held her tight and planted a friendly but firm kiss on her lips. The barman watched as the kiss was reciprocated. He knew the next move was to his room. The man waved at the barman as he placed his glass on the bar mat. He left a note under the glass as his tip. Moving quickly, he retrieved their glasses and pocketed the tip, smiling grimly as he watched the couple move towards the lobby. The kissing began in earnest in the lift on the way to his room, his hands now caressing Carrie's butt and breasts gently but firmly. He was now in control. The chase was almost over now. He had his prize in his grasp. Carrie gasped as his lips covered hers, seeking her and releasing the lust inside her. They staggered to his room as they kissed and fondled each other, giggling as they almost fell through the door. Clothes were dropped as they neared the large bed. Lips locked together, they were soon naked, reaching the peak of the acts with great love making together. After roughly 2 hours of workout, it was a release and relax from love. Time had come to finish and go. At around 2 a.m. they started to cool off and depart. As they both left the room, the man said, "I will call you a cab if you wish. If you have to be somewhere, that is." He smiled at her. "Thank you, that would be good. I need a shower first though." "Go ahead, I will make the call." As she showered, her thoughts slowly sampling reality in small bites. She wondered what had happened to Grace. It was okay though, she had still had fun tonight. Then she realized there had been no call from Pete. Maybe she missed it, but it was unusual. He always called. She dried herself off on the large fluffy towel and started to pull her clothes back on. As she reapplied her makeup, she opened up her phone. No missed call from Pete. She kissed her lover and she left the room. Walking along the hallway to the lifts, she started to feel a nagging doubt in her mind that sent a shiver down her spine. Something was not right. She pressed the lift call button and waited in the silent hallway. Her thoughts were all mixed up. Her body ached in the afterglow of a really good night of sex, but her mind was racing. She startled at the bell signifying the lift had arrived. She stepped inside and watched as the floor numbers descended towards the ground floor. Walking across the lobby, the night desk receptionist smiled at her as if knowing what she was. Carrie grinned to herself. It was not the first time she had been taken for a prostitute leaving a client at this time of the night. Carrie climbed into the black cab at the curbside and watched the lights of the city pass by as she was ferried home. Home, she thought. Pete wouldn't be back for another 2 days. She had a lot of time to spend alone still, that is, unless Grace makes an appearance. She sent her a text. "Had a great night with a real stud. Sorry you missed it, call me in the morning." See. Sitting back, she replayed the sexual antics of the night. She had his business card too if she fancied a repeat too. The cab pulled up outside her house. It was in darkness except for the security lights. She paid the driver and trudged up the path to her door. Slowly she went inside and, dropping her bag on the lounge floor, she kicked off her heels and headed to bed. Carrie could feel a thumping going on in her head. It would not stop, incessant and urgent it seemed. She opened her eyes groggily. She looked at the clock next to her bed. The noise was from her front door. It's 8 a.m. She dragged herself out of her bed, wrapped a robe around herself and headed towards the source of the racket. As she neared the door, she heard her voice. "Carrie! Open up, it's me, Grace, open up." Okay, okay, I am coming. She opened the door. Grace barged straight in past her. Is he here? Grace turned looking at her friend. Carrie. Is Pete here? No, of course he isn't here. He won't be back for another 2 days. Anyway, what happened to you last night? Carrie turned to fill the coffee maker. Grace grabbed Carrie by the shoulders, spinning her round. She looked into her eyes. Carrie, he knows. Pete knows. He knows everything. I don't know how, but he does, and he is the reason I couldn't go last night. What? What do you mean he knows? He can't know. How could he know? That feeling was back again. Something was wrong, wasn't right. He knows. Her mind racing now as Grace babbled away at her. Carrie was not listening. Grace shook her. Carrie, he was at my place last night. What? He couldn't have been. Grace shook her again. He was, and he knows. He has dates, names, photos. He even has videos, he told me. No, 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 it's not possible. How could he have all that? I don't know, but he has. He showed me some of it on his phone. Oh my God. No, 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 this is a nightmare. He just can't. The realization was starting to filter through into Carrie's mind when there was a knock at the door. Grace went to the door and returned with a grim look on her face. It's for you. She slumped in a chair at the kitchen table. Carrie looked up and saw a middle-aged man behind Grace. He stepped forward. Are you Carrie Franks? Yes, I am. She replied shakily. He handed her a large envelope. Thank you, ma'am, you have been served. He turned and walked straight out the door. There was a letter and also several smaller sealed and numbered envelopes. My dearest Carrie. If you are reading this, then you have outlived me. I enjoyed our time together. I won't say that I loved you, as that died when I found out about your affairs. Envelope number 1 is some guy you called David. I stopped reading and ripped open number 1. Pornographic images of David tit and coming on my face. I raced down the hall and emptied my gut. Oh my God. Pete knew all along. After rinsing with mouthwash, my wobbling legs led me back to the table. I resume reading Pete's letter. Envelope number 2 shows you it's Steve, your gynecologist. Looks like he needed a different type of probe. Yes, you were a very loving wife. My attorney told me it would be cheaper to keep her. I stopped reading and found number 2's pictures just as damning. It took me a few minutes to dry my eyes. What a fool I was. When I regained my composure, I continued reading. I reread it several times as if that would erase the searing pain in my heart. There is nothing left in the bank. I have it all, so you are doomed. Do I give a shit? No, you want it, you find it. I have emailed a selection of your most photogenic pictures to everyone we know. The send button is due to be hit at 9 a.m. No, it can't be stopped. Everyone at your work will know by 9:01, I am sure of that. You have had fun around with your friend. Well, now you may have to do it for real. Your loving, Pete. Grace watched her friend slowly melt into the floor of the kitchen as the life just oozed from her like the air from a deflating balloon. He's gone, Grace. He's gone. Grace watched her friend and replayed her own moment of realization those years ago when she knew what she had lost.